And now, if you don't know, now you know.
The States military conducted an apprehension mission in Caracas, Venezuela, to bring to justice two indicted persons, Nicolas and Cecilia Maduro.
We sent a real message to Iran and China and Russia that maybe it's not such a good idea to mess with us. And they tell me, look, if we come into Venezuela as a group and start to take out the regime, about 2/3 of the Venezuelan military is going to switch sides and join our cause.
People need to understand that this is not a president that just talks and does letters and press conferences. And, you know, if he says he's serious about something, he means it. But don't play games. Don't play games with this president's in office, because it's not going to turn out well.
Shalom, and it's nice to see you again, Yishai.
Where are we catching you?
I'm in Cucuta, Colombia today, on the border of Venezuela. This is a city that's like kind of the main crossing point where people fled Venezuela, about 8 million of them over the last 10 years, and went to other countries. Many of them stayed here in Cucuta. At one point, there were more Venezuelans in Cucuta than there were Cucuteños. But then they eventually moved on for, you know, greener pastures. About 700,000 of them went to the United States. And so this is the place you go to report on what's going on in Venezuela. If you can't go into Venezuela, which I can't. The last time I tried to go into Venezuela, they tried to kidnap me and I had to fight my way out. So it's a place that I've spent a lot of time, and this is a place where I come. It's a easy 1 hour flight from my home in Panama, and I can get here quick and find out what's going on the ground. What we have seen on the ground over the last couple of days, I got here just maybe 12 hours after that raid that took out Nicolas Maduro, is a lot of very happy people. Actually, there was a procession of them driving by with their stereos up full blast, screaming and yelling just about 60 seconds before I came on with you. And again, they're very happy, but they're also a little cautious. They're planning to, I've been asking people, are you going to go back into Venezuela now? And they're like, not yet, because as great as it is that Maduro is gone, President Trump took out Alibaba and left the 40 thieves. So the regime, the Maduro regime, is still in power under Delcy Rodriguez, who was sworn in as the interim president today. And the regime is still threatening its people. So they showed me, for example, text messages. Let's see if I can pull this up real quick. That are being sent out to Venezuelans in, you know, obviously in Spanish. This is what it looks like. And it's, I'll just translate it for you. It says, any one of you who are celebrating this grave aggression against our fatherland by the United States is going to be arrested and charged with treason, and then treated accordingly. So they're threatening essentially to line people up against the wall and shoot them if they go out in the streets and celebrate. So that's why you're not seeing major celebrations inside Venezuela right now, but you are seeing major celebrations in Panama, Argentina, and any other place where Venezuelans have ended up. So you saw a lot in Miami, et cetera, last night. Here in Cucuta, we saw fireworks. I saw dancing in the streets. There was a guy that was making up folk songs about President Trump, which was hilarious. But again, they're not ready to go home just quite yet. Some of them for economic reasons, and some of them for patriotic reasons are not going to go back. Meaning, I talked to some soldiers, for example, who defected from the Venezuelan military and are here in Colombia. And they're like, yeah, we are planning to go back in as soon as we get the word, so that we all go back in at the same time and can help to fight to reclaim our country. So we're waiting for the word from our leaders of the protest movement, and then we will go back in. Others, like the guy who cut my hair last night, said, I've built a business here in Colombia and I'm doing pretty well, and so I'm not going to leave that. And so what that tells you is that if President Trump wants the 700,000 or so Venezuelans who have come to the United States to leave and go back home now, he's got more work to do. But there's a challenge with that. The challenge is the law enforcement operation to take Nicolas Maduro into custody and take him to New York to face justice doesn't work against Delcy Rodriguez because she's not indicted as a narco trafficker. And so sending Delta Force back in to take out Delcy Rodriguez would be an act of war that would require the approval of Congress, which we're probably not likely to get. So even though most Americans are very happy with the way this went down, I'll tell you as a former military guy myself, you will never in your lifetime see another military operation that went off as flawlessly as this one. You just don't get that opportunity very often. And so kudos to the guys that went in. Kudos to President Trump for really having the stones to actually send them into harm's way. There were a lot of U.S. troops in harm's way the other night. And most American presidents have been unwilling to expend the political capital that it took to put U.S. troops in harm's way because of the cost in political capital of getting one killed. But President Trump actually was willing to do so, and those guys performed flawlessly. And I'll just tell you from a perspective of a soldier, that's what you sign up for. You want to go do bad things to bad people. You want to take out the bad guys and help the good guys. And so for a limp-wristed president like President Biden, for example, who would have likely not done this, not put troops in harm's way, you're taking a bunch of meat eaters, the guys that signed up to do things like this, and you're telling them that they have to eat cabbage for the rest of their career. And that is why our recruiting was so abysmal during the Biden administration and has rebounded amazingly since President Trump took office. Now, guys know if you join the U.S. military, you might actually get the chance at the Super Bowl to go to combat. And guys like me, that's what when you're young, that's what you want to do. You want to go to combat and prove yourself. Maybe they should go to Israel and sign up for the IDF. They'd get a much better chance of seeing combat most likely
get a good
over
chance
there.
to see it for sure. Okay, so speaking of Israel, the language that the Israelis used after the Maduro capture and extradition, whatever you want to call it, the taking him out, the language that people on the street here were using was, this was a message to Iran. Boy, was this a big message to Iran. That's the way people analyzed the Maduro operation here. Okay, maybe they projected our problems onto America's actions, or maybe there is a more close connection between Maduro, the regime there, and Iran, and the IRGC, and the Hezbollah, and funds that are globally moved from Venezuela to Hezbollah to Iran. So help flush that out. Were the Israelis right? Was there a message here to Iran? Did this affect the Middle East from South America?
Yeah, it was more than a message to Iran. It was a blow to Iran because, as you said, Hezbollah got a significant portion of its revenue from the drug trade, the illegal gold trade, and actually used car trade in Latin America. That's something that a lot of people don't know about. There's an amazing bright line between used cars being purchased in Latin America, shipped to Africa, sold at a profit, and the profit going directly to Hezbollah. And I've reported on that before. Hezbollah had a significant influence in Venezuela. And of course, if they wanted to get to the United States, they could just come to Venezuela, get sheep dipped with a new passport, and be Venezuelan when they got to the U.S. southern border. All of that is gone now. And so if Iran wants to continue using Hezbollah as a proxy, they are going to have to step up their support of Hezbollah. And of course, that's gotten much, much harder for them in the recent 2 years. And of course, their economy is teetering on the edge of collapse as it is. So it makes it much less likely that Hezbollah is going to be able to survive by taking this out. And I think that was one big thing President Trump had in mind. It's ever saying, oh, no war for oil. Well, first of all, yes, war for oil. Well, you say that like it's a bad thing. Oil is absolutely essential for everything we do. And not only that, but bad actors use oil as currency to fund their bad actions. And so taking that oil off the table makes it much more difficult for China, for example, because China's not going to be able to buy discounted oil from Venezuela anymore, because that oil will now be sold on the open market. It won't be sanctioned, and it's not going to be sold at a discount. And that's going to hurt China, right? So that's a big deal for China. The other big deal for China and Russia is that both of those countries in recent months have sent cargo planes full of very sophisticated, their highest, most sophisticated air defense assets, air defense artillery, air defense radars to Venezuela, with the intention of using any American attack on Venezuela as a laboratory to prove the efficacy of their most advanced radars and air defense missiles.
And this is after the great failure of Soviet defenses, Chinese defenses in Iran, right? This was a great embarrassment.
And in Ukraine,
all that armament.
and in Pakistan, everywhere else. And according to Dan Kane in the briefing he gave, those air defense assets were completely obliterated in this thing. Now, China 20 days ago made a video about how the United States was afraid to attack Venezuela because it had Chinese air defense radars now, and they had a ring of steel around Caracas that was impenetrable. And their air defense radars could find, fix, and finish American F-35 fighter jets at 150 kilometers before they even got into range of their missiles and things like that.
Wow.
And of course, all of that turned out to be absolutely trash. And so not only did Venezuela lose a significant portion of its air defense capabilities last night, but we sent a real message to Iran and China and Russia that maybe it's not such a good idea to mess with us. And China especially, if let's say that it had gone differently last night, and a bunch of F-35s got shot down, a bunch of Americans got killed, the helicopters all got shot down, all that sort of thing. If it had all gone wrong, that would have been a huge boost for China and made it much more likely that they would make a move on Taiwan sooner rather than later. But because it went so poorly for them, it's now much less likely that China is going to make a move on Taiwan sooner rather than later. They still might do it, but now they know their assets are no match at all for American technology.
It's like proxy wars are back. It feels like U.S. versus Soviet Union is back in a different constellation, a different way, but it's there. Venezuela, the way you're painting it, is really a China versus U.S. Battle there. And there's the other players: Russia, Iran, North Korea is probably part of it. So we know that axis. That's pretty incredible.
I've been saying that we are in World War III already, but this is what World War III will look like. World War III is not going to look like World War II with large armies, land battles, and things like that, because now all of those major powers are nuclear armed and they can't afford to go to war directly with each other. So World War III is going to be proxy wars all over the globe. And if you actually add them up, about 120 countries, which is 60-something% of the total number of countries on planet Earth, are actively involved in some sort of armed conflict right now, either inside their borders or outside their borders.
Wow.
So I think that is what World War III looks like.
Okay. Some people here in Israel complain that Prime Minister Netanyahu, while was effective in some ways versus Iran, and in some ways versus Syria and Hezbollah and in Gaza, he still left the bad guys intact. And he complained to President Trump the other day that Hamas has 60,000 Kalashnikovs. That really angered me, because I was like, it was your war to fight. Trump told you, get rid of them, erase them, evict them, all that kind of stuff, hell to pay. And yet you're saying now, well, they're still armed. Well, that was your responsibility. And so too with Iran, maybe to a different degree, but Iran, the regime is still there. You started this interview today by saying that the Maduro regime is still there. is still there. So
Mhm.
is that like a is that a smart a way of doing war and policy by decapitating it and then letting the people kind of destroy the rest of what's there, and so therefore the people will feel that they made a revolution, not the Americans. The Americans simply just took out the bad guy, but it's your
Mhm.
responsibility to govern your country. Or is it a mistake that you're just
Yeah.
doing the old mowing the lawn, but you actually didn't get rid of the bad guys in toto?
Mhm.
Which one is it?
I think I think it's the former. We certainly would like the Venezuelans to take some ownership of this and to finish the job. If the United States comes in and finishes his job at this point, it would have actual war, and we don't want an actual war with Venezuela. We don't want to put in Venezuela, but I have had this happen here in Cucuta so many times. I'm down at the and there's Venezuelans coming across the bridge. They cross to shop because there's no food in the stores in Venezuela. So they come across and they'll ride a bus 18 hours from Caracas to get to Colombia, to come right across the border, load up with rice and beans, and then get back on the bus with rice and beans in their lap and ride 18 hours back to Caracas. That's how bad it is inside Venezuela. And those people will very often ask me, they'll find out I'm an American and they'll say, hey, tell Donald Trump to send. And my answer to that
Wait,
is,
we didn't hear what you
why?
said. There
Any
was a
men in your
pause.
country?
We didn't, Chuck. We didn't hear what you
Oh,
said, Chuck Holton. They said to you what? What was the phrase that they said? Tell Donald Trump to what?
they said tell Donald Trump to come down here and take out Maduro. This is, before he actually did. Them was always, why? Are there no men in Venezuela? I mean, why should I send my son in the army to bleed and die for your country if you're not willing to bleed and die for your country? And so I think that right now would be the time, this is like see, for the U.S. to help facilitate the overthrow of the government, the rest of the regime in Venezuela, by going to the opposition and giving them what they need, whether that's intelligence, maybe weapons. I'm not a big fan of giving weapons to anybody. If it's bad enough that it needs to be done, then we should do it ourselves and keep our own weapons. Because if we don't, someday those durable and fungible weapons are going to be shooting back at us. We don't get to control where they go after the crisis is over. And there are plenty of Venezuelan soldiers who would likely change sides, because only about a third, according to reports, of Venezuelans are actually in favor of the current regime. And most of those third are criminals. So the reason that the Venezuelans have
one
not,
way or the other from the regime, right? They find ways to
right,
benefit, to be on the
right, yeah,
team.
the cartels were making money. One time when I was down here on the border, they call them colectivos, gangs in Venezuela that are used by Nicolas Maduro to do his dirty work. They tried to kidnap me and drag me to Caracas, way out of there. And it was pretty dicey. It made the Drudge Report when that happened. But those guys are now gone from the border. And that's a really good sign, because you don't see a bunch of Venezuelan troops along the border. You do see some Colombian troops and Colombian police that are arrayed along. There's a mass exodus or something from Venezuela. But in reality, the people that have escaped now, people who have figured out a way to make it work. It's not much of a life. If you look at pictures of hospitals, for example, or their shopping malls or anything like that, it's really bad. It's zombie apocalypse in Venezuela. The only real growth industry there is kidnapping. But that could change very quickly if the thousands of Venezuelan soldiers who have defected to Colombia get together and all as one force, especially if somebody were to arm them, go in and take out their country. They would have done it by now if they had the weapons to do so. There was a time a couple of years ago where they tried to go in and do a mission to take out a weapons depot so that they could arm themselves. And in the firefight that ensued, they were driven back and they lost because they just didn't have very many weapons. A guy that I interviewed was shot in the leg and captured, and they were going to execute him. But they weren't going to execute him until his leg. So he was in the hospital for his leg to heal, and about the time that it got good enough he could walk on it, he actually literally tied the bed sheets together and rappelled out the window and escaped. And he's now in Colorado. And I just talked to him today. So all those guys say that they're waiting for the word to go back in, but they're going to need more than just the word. They're going to need the weapons to do the job.
Is there any South American country that wants to support this? Is there anybody else who's around there who's like, we got to help because this thing is hurting all of us around here? Is there any, is Colombia or other countries interested in getting involved in this or not really?
Unfortunately, no. I mean, the countries that surround Venezuela are Colombia and Brazil. Of course, they have a long border with Guyana, but there's no roads between Guyana and Venezuela. And so there's not really any way for Guyana to help. And they're such a small country anyway, like 800,000 people, that they're kind of a rounding error. Certainly Brazil and Colombia are on the side of Maduro. So they're not helping. They're not going to be helping. And so if the United States wanted to do it, they'd have to probably work out a way to airdrop or bring in weapons directly into Venezuela, into a remote area, and then help somehow, just let the guys know, okay, get to this grid coordinate. I don't know. I mean, that's beyond my pay grade for sure. And the biggest thing that we could help those guys with is communications and intelligence. If we gave them what we have in terms of communications and intelligence capability, they could probably figure out the rest. But there are enough people, and they tell me, look, if we come into Venezuela as a group and start to take out the regime, about 2/3 of the Venezuelan military is going to switch sides and join our cause. We know it because we talk to those guys all the time, and they're just waiting for the word. So I think it's likely that the regime does fall, but how it happens could be diplomatic. It could be kinetic. It likely will not be kinetic on the part of the United States, however.
Chuck Holton, be safe out there, and tell the Venezuelan people that we're praying for them out here in Israel. And we know that in one way, their fight is it's funny, like in Israel, we a lot of times think of ourselves as fighting for the West, for America's interests. But in this case, in this funny kind of way, the Venezuelan people are fighting our fight in some way. Or at least when they fight their enemies, they're also getting rid of our enemies. So tell them that we in Israel support them. I want to thank you and pray for your safety. And of course, looking forward to seeing you back in the Holy Land soon. God bless you, Chuck Holton. I want people to check out all of your great content. You're, of course, on Newsbanks and CBN and other places, and your own content, Chuck Holton, can be found on YouTube and other places. Keep up the good work. God bless you. Thanks a lot. Be safe.
The Hot Zone with Chuck Holton here on YouTube is the best place to find me.
And your many books. Your many books already, right?
Oh, yeah. That's yeah. Working on another one.
All right, Chuck. God bless you. And thank
you very much for having me. I appreciate it.